What a great blessing it is to be with you. I am Pastor John Pennell of Calvary, Chapel of Lakeville, also one of the voices here on WLGS 101.5 FM. Time for today's devotional, looking at John chapter 6, finishing up chapter 6, verses 61 through 71. I titled this devotional, The Words of Eternal Life. In a 48-hour period, Jesus taught and healed many. He had fed the 5,000 and walked on water and taught of his body and blood in the synagogue of Capernaum. It was their confusion regarding his teaching of his body and blood that caused many disciples to turn away from him. For John wrote in verses 61 through 63, when Jesus knew in himself that his disciples complained about this, he said to them, "Does this offend you? What then, if you should see the Son of Man ascend where he was before? It is the Spirit who gives life. The flesh profits nothing. The words that I speak to you are spirit, and they are life." During the year of popularity, Jesus had many disciples, so John's mention of his disciples here does not merely refer to the 12. These other disciples were offended because their hearts were set upon physical things, not understanding that Jesus spoke to them about spiritual things. The Bible tells us in Jeremiah 17:9 and 10, "The heart is deceitful above all things and desperately wicked. Who can know it? I, the Lord, search the heart. I test the mind, even to give every man according to his ways, according to the fruit of his doings." Well, we find that Jesus acknowledged in verses 64 through 66, "But there are some of you who do not believe." For Jesus knew from the beginning who they were who did not believe and who would betray him. And he said, "Therefore, I have said to you that no one can come to me unless it has been granted to him by my Father." From that time, many of his disciples went back and walked with him no more. Jesus knew their hearts, those who would not believe in him, those who would betray him, those who would deny him. Jesus, from the beginning of his ministry, back in John 2:24 and 25, we find that Jesus did not commit himself to them because he knew all men. He had no need that anyone should testify of man, for he knew what was in man. The theologians call this the beginning of the third year of Jesus' ministry. They call it the year of opposition. It's the time when many of his disciples went back and walked with him no more. Those who walked away had rejected the words of the Spirit that they might continue in their desires of their flesh. Although this was a turning point in Jesus' ministry, it was also a point of solidification for the 11 of the 12 of the disciples. Therefore, Jesus said to the 12, "Do you also want to go away?" But Simon Peter said, "Lord, to whom shall we go? You have the words of life. Also, we have come to believe and know that you are the Christ, the Son of the living God." Verses 67 through 69. Though many of his disciples had rejected him, 11 of the 12 knew that Jesus had the words of eternal life, that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of the living God. Jesus said in John 5:24, "Most assuredly I say to you, he who hears my word and believes in him who sent me has everlasting life, and shall not come into judgment, but has passed from death to life." Peter said, "You have everlasting life." Well, the chapter closes with Jesus' revelation of his betrayer. In response to Peter, Jesus said, verses 70 and 71, "Did I not choose you, the 12? And one of you is a devil." And he spoke of Judas Iscariot, the son of Simon, for it was he who would betray him, being one of the 12. At the first mention of Judas in the four Gospels, each author tells that he was Jesus' betrayer. In the remainder of his gospel, John gives a little insight of Judas's character. Here we find that Jesus called him in verse 70 a devil. When Mary anointed Jesus with expensive perfume, in John 12 we learn that Judas complained, saying, "Why wasn't this fragrant oil sold for 300 denarii and given to the poor?" But John went on to explain to us that he didn't say this because he cared about the poor, but because he was the disciples' treasurer and was a thief. He was possessed by Satan, according to John 13:2, and betrayed Jesus. Well, we find that in John 18:1 through 11. In his classic book, Fox's Book of Martyrs, John Fox did not write about Judas, for Judas was no martyr, nor did he ever truly believe in Jesus. Although there were many who had been deceived and walked away from Jesus, it is my hope that we would be those who believe. That's my prayer for you this day.